Welcome to Shift, a college admissions ACT and SAT podcast for a changing world. I'm Tyler, the founder of Achievable, and we have an affordable ACT course that includes everything you need to ace your ACT. A full textbook, tons of online ACT questions backed by our memory-enhancing algorithm, videos on key topics, a built-in study planner, and full-length practice exams. You can get a free trial at achievable.me, and if you like it, the code podcast will get you 10% off at checkout. Now, let's get started. Today we've got Mary Johnson from Odyssey College Prep on the line with us. And Mary, I'd love if you could introduce yourself and your company.
Hi, thanks for having me here. I'm Mary, and I've been with Odyssey College Prep for about 2 years, tutoring mainly the English and reading sections. And it's been really good. I really liked it. It's nice to teach students and see lots of progress that they are making. It's meaningful work. It's just a fun place to be. I like it.
Great. Yeah, and so from your time there, you have learned a little bit about how to properly take a practice test, right? And that's the big thing, I think, is that I think everybody probably takes practice tests, but I think very few people actually do them in the way that is going to most improve their score. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about sort of how you guys approach practice tests with your customers.
Yeah, we always do a practice test before any tutoring happens, right? To kind of see where the progress is going, if there's progress made, what kind of progress is made. And we tell people that it's best to take a practice test in the same circumstances that you would take an actual ACT test, right? If you can mimic those same conditions, whether that be being in a really quiet place, right? In a place where you won't be disturbed, maybe at a specific time of day. Things like that will make the results more accurate because that's probably how you're going to actually perform later, right? Because for better or for worse, you're probably going to be taking your ACT at 8 a.m. in some high school on a Saturday morning, right? So whether you would prefer that or not, that's the reality. And so we want to set you up for success, like put you in those same circumstances. You'll probably perform about the same way. So I think that's the biggest advice there, though, is mimicking those circumstances on the actual time.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like the first thing. And I think it's really important to get an accurate read both on your ability and also just like an accurate sense for the constraints of the real test. I think that, making sure that it's timed is super important. Making sure that you're not distracted and in like a quiet place is important. I've even had some people recommend that you get like your mom or your brother or something to like proctor for you so you can get used to somebody else being there.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think just all in all, like that's really good because I think a lot of getting ready for the ACT is like the mental game, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's such a long test. My goodness. It's like nearly
Hmm.
4 hours of just sitting and test taking. You get one break right in the middle. It's a lot. So your mental
Yeah,
endurance is a big deal, right? Not taking breaks like, oh, I'm just in my house. So I took my first section. Now I can go get a snack. And that's like totally
yeah.
bending the rules there.
Well, yeah, and I think that fatigue is a big part of it, right? Like I think a lot of students nowadays, they might be used to taking like 1 hour of tests at a time, like not four straight. So I think that that's definitely a big piece of it too. Now, so you make sure you take a accurate practice test. Do you have any other tips for just like taking that test like the day of?
Yeah, I think it sounds cliche. It's true. You should get a good breakfast. If you don't give your mind any fuel, you probably won't perform to the best of your ability. I also wouldn't my boss loves to say this. I love it. He says you probably also shouldn't carb up on pancakes like that morning and just eat like a bucket of pancakes, and you'll be all sleepy and just sleep through your test. It's like, oh, on a normal day, I just eat a Pop-Tart, but today I will have this giant breakfast. So you don't want to do something totally out of the norm, but I would suggest, eating something substantial. Don't be super hungry. Just make sure your body's taken care of. Let's see. Getting enough sleep, right? These things are really important. Just making sure that you're not depriving your body of the things it needs so it can work.
Right. And it's also like, again, you're trying to really mimic the real test experience. If you take a practice test and then you are like super tired because you stayed up late the night before and you get bad scores, that's also kind of defeating the purpose of it. Because like the goal of an ACT practice test, and I think it's important to mention this goal when kind of talking about like how to take a good test in the context. The goal of the test is to give you an accurate picture of what you're doing well on and not doing well on so that you can go back and study more and improve it. Right?
Yeah.
So if you get, if you take a bad practice test and you're going to get bad data and then you're doing a bunch of work based on that bad information.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to do that and have to invest all this time in things that aren't necessary. I totally get that.
Yeah, so once you've got we've kind of covered try to take the most accurate tests that you can. Make sure you're trying to take like real ACT practice tests, though. Obviously, the ones that your vendor provided are also hopefully good, but try to use those real ones as a benchmark. Now, once you've taken this test, like what are the best things to do afterward to make the most of the information that you've gotten from it?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, you'll probably be. So I've actually, it's kind of shocking, but I've heard from a lot of people, they'll look at their scores and go, oh, okay, I did the worst on reading. And so then they'll just say, oh, my score is lowest there, so I'll just focus on that. And they don't actually look back on the ones they got wrong. Even on the sections that they got their best scores on, if you got the best scores in math, but they didn't look back on the ones they got wrong. And wouldn't you want to know and correct those and see if there's a pattern to what you're doing wrong to fix that? That is huge. It's so often too that we'll see a pattern in the things that a student is doing wrong. If you're doing the same thing over and over and over, and if you can just fix it, then you're way better. So looking at individual questions is so important. I've heard from a lot of people too that it's time consuming, but it's valuable to look at the ones you got right as well. Right? If you have the time, this was my thinking. It worked. Great. Let's move on. But identifying how your brain is solving problems and identifying good things about that, bad things about it, and thinking about those processes is really important.
Right. Well, and also you just kind of touched on something that I like to do in the negative case too, which is called like making an error log. Right. So if you have things that you got wrong, then, go through those problems for sure. Take a note of which of the what areas you're struggling in the most. And then the other piece of it is try to go back and think about where you went wrong on each problem, right? Like go through the explanations and see where, your math diverged from theirs or your logic was wrong. Because it gives you a lot more insight into what you should be doing to improve your score afterwards. Like if you find that when you're doing math, you're just consistently making mistakes with positive versus negative and like parentheses or something like that, then now you know that that's something you can focus on. And also, that's like, kind of a serious problem because that can come up on any question, right? And then on the other hand, if you're doing, like, say, an English question and you just got it wrong because you didn't know the vocab word, well, you're like, okay, if this happens a few times, maybe I should start studying some vocab, right? But if it doesn't really happen very often and you got one wrong from a vocab word, but you got six more wrong from punctuation rules, well, now you know where to study, right? But it's also like how you got it wrong, I think is super important, especially in math questions. Because in math, a lot of times you might basically like have had the wrong formula in your head or not memorize the formula. Or you might have had everything that you needed to succeed, but made a careless mistake. Or, you did something wrong, like foiling. That is like a method that you need to practice. And so it really helps you kind of diagnose a little bit more about where your wrong answers are coming from, and then you can address those problems.
Totally. I'm actually learning some math right now, like basic math over again. I haven't had a math class in a decade, but I'm relearning these things. And even today, I was doing some practice questions on Achievable and with my husband over my shoulder because he's a chemical engineer and he knows math. And he's like, oh, okay, I know. He knows the answer way before I know it, right? But as I'm doing these questions over and over, I solve the math problem and then I click the answer and it's wrong. I'm like, what? I don't understand. He's like, did you read the question? And every time I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not satisfying the prompt. I need to read the question and get too excited, but I'm making the same mistake over and over. And so now I know, now I can fix it, pay more attention to those things. But yeah.
Right. And if you just said, oh, I got that problem wrong because it was this type of question, that wouldn't give you all the context, right? So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Do you have any other things that can help you take an effective ACT practice test that you'd like to talk about today?
I think those were good things. Once again, for sure, mimicking the same, making sure you're taking an accurate practice test and making the most of it after you've taken it. If you just take it and don't make the most of it afterward, don't analyze what you've done, it won't do you that much good other than giving you some, I suppose, mental preparation of what's coming later.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's not about your practice. It's not about your practice test, it's how you use it. Though I do think, it is helpful and more useful to take a better practice test. And I think that always keep the goal in mind, right? Your goal is to identify areas that you should work on to improve your score and use that goal to guide you in like how you're approaching it. You need to take it as seriously as you take the real test in order for it to accurately represent the real test.
Agreed. Yes.
Great. Well, this has been Shift, a college admissions podcast for a changing world, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Mary Johnson from Odyssey College Prep. You can get a free trial of Achievable's ACT course by going to achievable.me and use the code podcast to get 10% off at checkout.